Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the Epic Narrative.
And we're off, ladies and gentlemen, on another wild adventure of the journey to the promised land. Oh, here we are. Welcome to the Epic Narrative. As always, it's a pleasure to have you here. And we will roll through this one, I believe. We are still in Deuteronomy chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 19. So this is kind of the setup to the promised land, right? God brings them to a mountainous area. Moses, describes it there pretty clearly. And he tells them, do not be afraid. Do not lose resolve. So the Lord's like, listen, I'm going to show you what I'm going to give you. I'm going to show you what I'm going to give you. Now, we've been over and over and over again the victim mentality, right? They look at the promised land and they think there's no way we deserve this. There's no way God just gives this to us. And remember, the idea of giving it was not the idea that God was going to commit genocide and just, send a plague and kill everyone. Several times reviewed throughout these books, as well as briefly in the book of Exodus, he basically says, Moses reminds them, just like what happened to Egypt, God will fight for you. In other words, he will allow the enemy to do what the enemy does. In other words, those that follow and worship the enemy are going to end up being killed by the enemy. That's just the way the enemy works. It's like, God knows. He knew the plagues were coming. He warned Pharaoh over and over again, let my people go, just walk in one day of obedience to me, and I can end this projection of what the enemy is doing going to do to your nation. And Pharaoh couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. Somehow felt threatened by the protection that God was offering him. Anyways, we dealt with that back in Exodus. Hope you guys enjoyed that season, but we will roll on in this season. Moses is reminding them, we came to the promised land. I told you, don't be afraid. See, the Lord has given you, verse 21, go take possession of it, as the Lord said, the God of your ancestors told you. Don't be afraid, don't be discouraged. That idea of possession, not the idea of warfare. I know I get loud, right? I do. I want to emphasize this because for far too long in my life, my experience, in my journey in Christendom, this whole idea of possession was God wanted them to go to war. And it's just not there. I understand the application of the word here in Western culture. And I understand the attraction of being a warrior race to go ahead and destroy the nations. But it has handicapped, hindered, and often greatly reduced the influence of Christianity on this nation because everybody wants to start a fight rather than influence, i.e. take possession through culture. Anyways, verse 22, then all of you came to me and said, let us send out spies. This is an interesting thing, right? Now, we went over this a little bit in Leviticus? I forget. But it was out there, right? A key framework to the idea of spies was all of you, which literally means a mob approach. There was no order, no honor given to the elders or families or the leaders. This was just a mass of people at the front of Moses' door. And I know he didn't have a door, he had a tent. Anyways, the mass of people just screaming, we need to send out spies. We need to know what the land is like. We can't just cross the Jordan. What if there's bad people there? What if there's What if there's an ambush? We're not warriors. We just came out of Egypt. We're in terrible shape. We've been slaves. We've traveled all this way. We're hungry. We're like whatever. Every excuse a victim could think of was in there. Moses is listening to all this, right? And he's sensing that there's no faith in God's promise to give him the land. He just said in verse 18 and 19, just go take possession. Trust the Lord. Remember what he's done. He brought you up out of Egypt. No, they were freaking out. Freaking out. It had to be quite spectacular to watch. So he's like, all right. It seemed like a good idea. I love that. Verse 23. Okay, I relented. Now, if it had been a military answer to accomplish God's promises, there would have been some indication of that. God would have made that clear. There would have been some training. There would have been some plunder that would have been important. There would have been some purchase. We arrived at the Moabite border and we purchased 100,000 metal spears and 50,000 chariots and horses or whatever. Like there was none of that. Why? Because it wasn't the plan. They believed that was the plan. They wanted to be feared by the nations. They wanted to be big and bold, and they weren't that yet. They wanted God to be exalted through death and genocide. They clearly didn't know God very well. They had just met him at the mountain. It freaked him out. And they were like, this is huge. He's huge. We're tiny. He's huge. We're just, and if we're going to represent that, then we need to be fearsome. We need to be bold. We need to be battle ready. We need to know what we're getting into. So they were going to put their faith in what they knew about the land, about what they knew about the people, about what they knew about the people's idols and the gods that they worshipped. They weren't going to put their faith in what God already told them to do. And I understand that it is difficult to put your faith in what God's told you to do. Occasionally, you meet people like that. They're just out there doing what God told them to do. Now, and you think, well, what? Well, God bless them. Like, I don't know what to tell you. What you're doing is crazy. I've met people like that. Absolutely. Some people I think are just crazy, but that's another, we can get into that sometime. If you ever meet me personally, we can talk about it. But the ones who seem to walk it out correctly, have faith in what God told them to do. They take the encouragement of the Lord along the way, and they wait for God to fulfill his promise. Yes, Bob. Yes, I think my wife and I are walking that out right now. And I think we're doing a good job of it. It doesn't mean every day is full of, that we don't go to God and say, when will we see the promise? But he sends his encouragement and we do what we can along the way. There wasn't that. They were going to put their faith in what they knew. They wanted spies to be sent out. They needed to know the land. They needed to know the people. They needed to know what produce was out there. They needed to know where the strongholds were, because that was what they're going to put their faith in, what they could do, what they could take hold of. And that's an easy thing to get distracted by. Even in ministry, right? You get going to ministry all based on faith, and then it starts to transition to, I'm going to make something happen. We have resources. We have opportunity. I'm going to make something happen in the ministry. It doesn't mean that it's illegal or sinful or wrong, but it shows a lack of trust in what God's telling you to do. Now we have to remember, right, that God will let you choose how you want to represent him on this earth. Let me say that again. God will let you choose how you want to represent him on this earth. And when you think about it, this is what should occur. The more you look like Jesus, the better job you're doing. And if you don't know what Jesus would do, then go to the stories of Jesus and do what you think he'd do. Jesus never started a battle. Was he in a few? Kind of, yes. Jesus never gave anyone sickness, never prayed for anyone to die, never killed anyone. Oh, man. Think about how that would impact the way so many ministries approach intercessory prayer for the nation. It's a fascinating thing, everyone. It's fascinating because we'd rather not have many have been trained. Many have been trained that in order to look like Jesus, they need to be offended. They need to be aggressive. They need to stand their ground. That if they don't, then you're talking about a mamby-pamby Jesus, a wimp. Nope. Man, he was a powerful force on this earth. Literally, the entire earth knew of his existence, even though there were many that claimed to be the Messiah back in his day. But he stood above them all. Why? Because he represented God. And he did so in a manner that drew all men to him. And we could do the same. And that's what he calls us to do. And that's what he says we could do. He's like, you can do this. You can do this and do it even more. You do better than me. Anyways, I think it's fascinating that God will let you choose the way you want to represent him on this earth. You don't have to feel hemmed in by any boundaries like that. And then in verse 23, Moses says, so it seemed good to me. So what this implies, the implication of the text, right? Literarily speaking, this was not a God plan. This was Moses saying, all right, I'll send in spies. Now, was God part of it? God doesn't go anywhere. His goodness is still there. He's all in. He's like, Moses, if that's what you want to do, that's what we're going to do. I'm not going to stop you because I gave you the authority to lead the people. And if God takes that authority back, then he didn't really give the authority to begin with, which makes this whole system start to fall apart real quick. So that's what happened. He sends in spies. The spies go out and they spend 40 days getting information all over the country. They come back, they give us reports. And he's like, you heed the reports. You saw the evidence of what God wanted to give you. And you slandered God by saying he couldn't do it. You slandered God because you were afraid. You slandered God because you didn't want to trust him. You rebelled. And you wanted to negotiate a return to Egypt. You wanted, instead of following what God asked you to do, just cross the Jordan, spread out, quote, take possession of the land. You wanted me or somebody else, if I wouldn't do it, to go back to Egypt and negotiate your return. We will return and work for you in exchange for 3 days off a month or whatever. Like that was the type of mentality. And we're getting these insights. And again, this is from Moses' memory as he's walking out the last few weeks of his life. He's saying to the people that are left over, this is why we are in the wilderness for 40 years, is because you Maybe not you yourself because you were 12 years old, but the nation basically said, we don't trust the word of God, which of course was not the Bible, right? The word of God was God and is God. The word of God is Jesus, and Jesus is God. Like it, again, something that a lot of people forget when they're reading the Bible, because we hear it called the word of God so many times in our lives that we begin to think that it is the word of God. The word of God is God. And they didn't trust God. So verse 29, he's like, what did I write? Oh, yeah. He's like, God is going to make everything like he did in Egypt. He's going to let the enemy do what the enemy does, kill, steal, and destroy. He's going to show you, as you enter the land, he'll show you where to camp, where to stay. You will be a culture of heaven, which will bring life and abundant life and massive returns on your crops. You're going to take, the whole idea of the Sabbath year and the Jubilee year, the idea that you're going to get, I think Jubilee year, right? You were going to get enough crops in the 48th season to cover 3 years of food that you would need because of how abundant God was going to send your crops. Like, that's the culture of heaven. You can choose not to be that part of that culture, in which case, ultimately, everything you have will be killed, stolen, or destroyed. That's the culture of the enemy. God's like, listen, you go in and possess the land. You go, I'm going to show you where to camp. You're going to set up your camps. You're going to hang out with one another. You're going to live life with one another. You're going to be doing all that stuff. And along the way, the abundance and the abundance of resources, the abundance of love, the abundance of family. Meanwhile, those who are not part of the culture of heaven are going to reap what they've been sowing, which is wars and death and politics and strife, and crops will be destroyed through wars, through hoarding, through over farming of land. Like, all of that's going to occur to them. The enemy destroys his people. And the people who are paying attention are going to be drawn to you because of what I bring, because of your worship of me. And remember, they're not just Hebrews that are getting these promises, right? There's foreigners that have come to be a part of and have attached themselves to the Israelites. So it's not going to be unprecedented. Like there's no foreigners here. They're going to see foreigners from other lands that were slaves in Egypt that came out with them, foreigners that are Egyptians that are like, hey, we liked what they were talking about. We're going to follow them. There's lots of ways that this could go in an amazing way to take possession of the land without ever throwing a rock, shooting an arrow, or throwing a spear. But they wanted to put their faith in what they knew. So in verse, we've been rolling along here, sorry. Oh, so you started listening to the reports. And you chose the reports that said, there's no way we can win any battles in here. These people are huge. The land is incredibly wealthy, but we don't deserve it. There's no way we're going to get it for free. The cost is too high. Let's go back to Egypt. You listened. And when the Lord heard what you said, he said, well, then they won't get it, except for Caleb and Joshua. And he also got mad at me. He saw what I did. I gave in to you. This was my idea to send in spies and to let their report and your response to it be what we do. Like, I did not listen to him. And because of that, I won't get in. And so we set out and headed into the wilderness. And that's where we've been for the last 40 years. Moses was responsible for his choice. He could have stood up to reports as well. He could have just said, I don't care what the 10 said. We're going with what God said, which is to go take the land. We're going to take the report of the 2. And that's what we're going to build our policies on, because their report falls in line with trusting God. The other reports, I'm not saying they're not true. I'm just saying they come from a place of fear. They come from a place of knowledge, not trust and faith. You could say, some would say they ate from the wrong tree. He's saying, I let the people become rebellious. And the results of those choices was, I don't get to go in. Right? And then because of that, if you remember, the people swinged. They went the other direction. Remember, they got up in the morning, they're like, oh, wow. This was bad on us. We probably should have trusted God. As a matter of fact, we will go start taking possession of the land right now. We're going to go make war with the Amorites right now. And Moses was like, please don't do that. You're not going to win. God's not with us. In other words, God's not with battle. That's not the plan. They're like, no, we can do it. We're going anyways, whether you say so or not. Again, in absolute rebellion, they went into war. And they came back utterly destroyed, running for their lives. So they choose to come back to God. But the results of their choices remain, which is 40 years in the wilderness and an entire generation that will die out. I'm looking. So, oh man, it's been 25 minutes. All right. I think that's enough for today. We had a couple. I know it's a short one. I think we're just going to end it here. It's like I'm looking at my notes for the next chapter. It's like, do I go? Like that could be another 20 minutes. Well, that's only 40 minutes long, I guess. What do we want to do? All right, we're going to call it a day. I already said, that's like a preacher who's like, oh, I'm going to get done early today. And then they go longer. We're going to get done early today, everyone. I hope you had a great time hanging out with us at the Epic Narrative. We'll see you again next week. As always, it's a pleasure.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for listening to that. The title of it kind of came from the idea that, sometimes, like Moses, you review he was reviewing to the people why it was that they were in the wilderness for 40 years. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves about, that we're sitting in the results of our choices. And when those results can be really long-term, like I'm thinking of like a really bad financial decision, right? It takes years to recover from. And sometimes people forget why. And it's like, whatever, like, why are we having these problems? Why, what brought us here? It's like, well, this is what happened. We made a decision and this is where we are. It could be, and I'm not saying you went bankrupt, but maybe the house you're in or the business you started or the career path that you went on, or the student loans you got. I don't know. But sometimes you just need a review, and that's exactly what Moses was doing here. So, I still wonder, what a difference it would have made if they had listened to the 2 spies and had gone in, and how it probably would not have been a military expedition. It would have been, what's the phrase that God uses? To take possession of the land. That phrasing doesn't mean aggressive military positioning. It means to inherit. It takes time. It means through relationship. They would overwhelm the culture of the earth with the culture of heaven and give examples of what it looks like to live in that culture. And through relationship, they would build up these other nations to be just like them, children of God who worship Yahweh. But that wasn't the choice they made. And so they spent 40 years in the wilderness. And as you'll see in season 5, they did not learn their lesson to go in and do relationship. Nope. They went in to do battle. Oh man, we got some lessons to learn in that season. I am currently recording it, and it made me think of this too. If you're out there and you have a business and you'd like me to mention you on a regular basis, reach out and let's work out a way in which you could support the Epic Narrative Podcast, and I can support you and appreciate your opportunity that you took to support us. I have a couple really faithful listeners who support monthly, and I'll tell you, it means the world to me and to those that help put this thing together, as well as keeps us on the air with some really cool apps and stuff that we have to keep up on in order to maintain what we got. So yeah, appreciate all those who have given, whether it's a one-time, big-time, amazing gift, as several have, or those who give monthly. But if you want to, if being a sponsor, I guess, of some sort of the Epic Narrative would work for you, then let's work it out. That'll be fun. I am not a nonprofit, so you will not get to write this off. Oh, good times. All right. Well, there was something else. Oh, I wanted to also mention again that we have the pastoral conversations on my YouTube channel. Look under the playlist, and you'll find it there. It's a 10-part series. They're about an hour apiece of a conversation between me and another pastor. Both of us are gifted in pastoring from the fivefold gifts that are mentioned in Ephesians, and I just want you to know that they're there, and it might be something helpful for you. As we do mention the other gifts that the Lord has and how the pastoral role interacts, or how it should interact with them, as well as give some insights. A lot of times I think people with the title of pastor, which occurs pretty regularly in just about any church, often frustrate people, as well as become frustrated because they are not actually pastors. And the people get frustrated because they don't feel really cared for when they're around them. And the individual gets frustrated because people frustrate them because they need pastoral care, and they keep coming to the guy named pastor or the woman named pastor to get it, and they're not real pastors, and it ends up becoming quite a quandary. Anyways, you might enjoy that series. That's on my YouTube channel, The Epic Narrative, and you can check that out on the playlist file. All right. Hope you're having a fabulous day. I look forward to seeing you next week on The Epic Narrative.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com, or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.